Thanks for coming. I'm Leilani, or Lay. I'm a product marketing manager at Covalent. So I think I've seen a couple of you at our booth this morning, or all through the day, really. I'm just going to give an overview of Covalent, how you can use it, and how it might be useful for this hackathon. And this is kind of the broad agenda for the talk. So before we get started, if I haven't kind of given you the spiel already at the booth at some point today, Covalent is an indexing company for blockchain data. So what we have is an API that's actually free, and it's unified so you can use it across all the different chains that we index, which currently is 35 different blockchains. And then you can basically build multi-chain applications pretty quickly. It's a REST API, and it's also read-only. So those are kind of like the ground details before we get into the rest of the presentation. Common use cases are like wallets, NFT galleries, but any on-chain data you can pull into your applications with us. So yeah, I'll cover some of the data challenges just so you get an overview of like how we compare to other solutions, go a little more into the API, how to access it, get started, and then our bounty info, because we are doing a $10,000 bounty for ETH New York. So, and it's a general bounty, so if you use the API at all, you're actually eligible for part of that prize money. So, kind of how we usually start off these presentations. Maybe if you've participated in ETH Global Hackathons before, you might have actually seen one of these kind of talks that we do and overviews. But Covalent's always really been focused on the future, interoperability, and just gambling on like real mass adoption of blockchains, whether or not that's in a DeFi landscape. I like the woo. Or like whether or not you even know you're using a blockchain. So in the future, we see millions, maybe billions of pieces of information on chain. I should update that slide actually, because I think like there's already dozens of blockchains. And lots of applications, which means also lots of users. And initially when Covalent was developed, it was with this in mind, which was that data was going to be very complicated and in demand, especially because blockchains are not all the same. They use very different architecture. We've seen the EVM model and now the non-EVM model, and it can be challenging to standardize data across those, to access them, to learn new tools and new ecosystems and all of the things that come with that. So that's kind of where we saw the data challenges and what we wanted to address. So what it kind of boils down to is interoperability. And this is everything from like users, so if you've even just used a DeFi protocol or bought an NFT or really done anything in the Web3 space, you notice that it's pretty fragmented. There are different solutions across different chains, and a lot of solutions are kind of in silos. So especially for developers like yourselves, if you're building applications and you have that user persona in mind where you want to aggregate their data perhaps to make that UX or UI a little bit easier, there aren't many solutions to actually do that. And there's also just so much data on the blockchain in general. So doing the indexing work yourselves or running your own infrastructure could be pretty challenging because it's just adding an element on top of what you already want to build. So this is like a little bit more into the data challenges. I know I'm like really illuminating the problems here. But not only is it complicated, it can be expensive. If you have your own, if you have experience like running your own nodes perhaps, you know that the more you scale, the more your project grows, the more you're also paying. And at some point that's quite a barrier, I think, to a lot of growth in some interesting use cases. Also missing, delayed data, lack of standards, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of problems. I don't think we need to illuminate every single thing because if you've spent time building in this space, you probably have run into these problems. So that kind of leads me into the Covalent API. I hope you can see that QR code. It's just going to take you to our website, which is the point of contact for signing up for an API key, which is free, but also for all of the information that I'm going to cover throughout the presentation. So if you want to follow along, you can do that, and I'll go into some of those links as well. It's one solution to access all on-chain data. So the unified aspect, as I mentioned before, aggregates different APIs across different blockchains so that you're only really interfacing with one tool. And you do that through what's called a chain ID. In the future, it might be a chain name. We're just trying to make that the easiest possible experience for developers. But basically, if you built a project on Ethereum and you want to include Polygon or you want to include another chain that your users might be on, you just have to change a parameter to be able to add that in. So it's super useful for focusing on multi-chain applications. It's also useful for all historical data, granular transaction data, really anything on the chain we index. And what's nice about the Unified API is that it's a standard request and response format. So we're pretty big on developing a standard for data so that, again, you're not kind of like reinventing the wheel every single time you build something new. So yeah, you can get really familiar with the tool and the response, and then as we scale, you scale. That's kind of the idea with this. There's also no code required. So recently, I'll show you the docs in a little bit, but we did develop an analyst mode because we saw that a lot of kind of normal users or people dipping their toes into Web3 want to be able to understand the data and make quick insights and cut through the kind of the noise on Twitter and things like that. So that is a useful feature as well. So this is kind of where we fit in the crypto stack. It's a question I think we get pretty commonly because there are a lot of different infrastructure solutions out there. There's people that both read and write to the blockchain. We are kind of a read-only layer, so you can think of the blockchains as the blockchains. I guess they're the foundation where the data lives. The nodes are the way that you interact with those blockchains. So without Covalent, you'd be running your own nodes, paying a node provider, or using some other kind of solutions. But where we sit is between that and the application layer. So really what we support is just those applications on top. So if you need to display any kind of data or pull in those feeds into your applications, whatever you're doing, we just make it easier so that you don't have to do all those steps beforehand. You don't have to run your own nodes. You don't have to write complex queries. You just make API calls and the data is instant. So that's kind of how we see supporting the scaling issues of just development in the ecosystem. I think at this point, we've seen reports that there's a pretty small group of developers, so I think a big chunk of the active ones in Web3 are actually at these events, because I think I read there's 30,000 active monthly developers in Web3, which when you think about that globally, it's really not a lot. So in order to make that process easier, you need better onboarding tools or things that people are just familiar in general, like APIs. People understand APIs, and we can simplify that language and make it easier for more people to build in this space. So that's kind of how we see empowering more users. Again, kind of just supporting adoption in general, because as much as it's really exciting to meet your small little tribe at these events, to support the mainstream and to make it for all of us, we need to make it easier for people that have no experience or don't know what any of these things mean. So these are kind of our two main users. Developers like yourselves, maybe crypto isn't the right word, maybe Web3 is a little bit better, but developers, and then analysts. So really in the past year, I think we saw a lot more mainstream news applications covering the crypto markets, and if you've read some of those articles, I don't know where they get the data. It's not always accurate. It is hard to find just granular, accurate data that is easy to access. So if you don't have that, you can rely on misinformation or on other sites that might not be giving you the most. I mean, it's just better to be able to do things yourself and verify it yourself. Anyway, with that in mind, we did develop an analyst mode. So with the API, if you use it in developer mode, you'll get a JSON response. But if you switch it to analyst mode in our docs, which I'll show you, you can actually just download those directly as CSVs, or you can see it as a spreadsheet in the browser. So even if you are a developer and if you have limited time at these hackathons, I think it's a really useful way to just visualize the data, because you can clearly see all the columns that you'd be getting and what those values are. So this is a little bit about our ecosystem, some of the bigger projects that use us, but also just the proof that a lot of developers have tried out Covalent and really enjoy the ease and the speed of working with it. I think especially because you have a tight turnaround at these hackathons, it's kind of nice to have one solution that you can really experiment with. It's good for beginners as well, but also bigger projects that, again, kind of want that standard response, multi-chain capabilities, and everything else that we support. So just a little bit about our network. One of the questions that we used to get a lot is, are you decentralized? How does that work with Web3? It is important to a lot of people in this ecosystem. We actually are decentralizing, and we took a big step a couple months ago with launching single-sided staking and launching what is called a block specimen producer. I'm not going to get too into the details because I don't think that's the most relevant. If you want to learn more, you can talk to me after. But basically, it's a first proof-based extraction mechanism for the blockchain. So what we do is we have validators that are running our block specimen, We extract the data, and then they verify that it is, they verified it with a cryptographic signature that is accurate. So that's a really important part of our decentralization step. And throughout the rest of the year, we plan to decentralize the storage, the indexing, the querying, really probably in like a quarter by quarter format. So we're looking at about a year roadmap, but of course things are kind of, flexible in that way. But yeah, that would be the universal decentralized data model for multi-chain indexing and querying. It's quite a complex sentence, but you get it, we're decentralizing. So this is a little bit more on the bounty that we're providing for ETH New York. So $10,000 in stablecoin. ETH New York itself actually distributes that. So yeah, but basically it's just meaningful use of the API. So we like to keep it open because actually our slogan is one unified API, 1 billion possibilities. When you're a data provider, you don't really gear people in a certain direction. It's better to actually just see what comes out of events like these and I really like the unique use cases. So if you have a weird idea in mind and you need any sort of on-chain data, the most useful endpoint, I think, is like log events. You can scrape through those. You can do that by topic hash. You can go through the contracts. But we do have specific endpoints for NFTs, for instance, specific balances endpoints. I'll show you those in the docs as well. So by meaningful use, the top prize is 3,000, the minimum prize is 500. And basically, we judge it based on complexity and the creativity of the use case. So if you do combine more than one endpoint, you're typically eligible to win more. But if you integrate Covalent at all with other solutions or whatever you want to do, that's totally okay. And you'll be eligible to win part of that bounty. So I can go to those details a little bit more in depth once we get into my other links. So here's kind of the primary developer resources. One is our Covalent docs. Obviously, when you try a new product, you go to the docs to see how it all works. So on there, you can see supported networks, more info on the blockchains that we actually support and how you can use those endpoints. You can also see how-to guides. You can see some of the other tech that we have built on top of the API that's an option for you to use. Then there's the API reference itself. So that is the extension of the docs where you can actually try the API live in the browser. So we added that feature last year, and it was a really important thing for us, again, to make that onboarding experience a little bit easier. So you can actually see exactly what the data is that you'll be getting before you go ahead and build something with it. So you can try all of the endpoints live in the browser, and you can view that response. And you can see the fields and everything like that before you might pull it into another solution. And then the third important resource, if you've been by our booth, I've probably plugged this to you as well, is our code templates. So we've started to build out more code templates, components, tutorials, just kind of focusing on onboarding more people into that ecosystem. And we have a giveaway going on that if you go to that link for our code templates, you star our repository, you enter to win AirPods Pros, which we'll give out at the end of this conference. So yeah, and now I'm actually gonna go to these links. Okay, it's a little bit complicated on here. Okay, so is that showing my whole screen? Yeah, it is. We love to see it. There we go. So this is what our docs look like. You have an overview of pretty much everything that I just said. So what Covalent is, apps that are building on us, and then the sidebars where you can get the rest of the information. This is covalenthq.com/docs. And what you can do is expand the developer tools. You can see the updates that we've recently made here. We do that month by month. You can see Primer, which is kind of similar to MongoDB. It's another thing that you can do to customize your API queries. And you can click on supported networks. So this is where we show all of the information on our blockchain partners. We're adding these like crazy right now. It's been a really big year for indexing for us. So yeah, stay up to date with those because it's pretty exciting. But if you go to click on them, for instance, you can just see the chain ID, a little bit more details. Oh yeah, I wasn't going to click on anything because the Wi-Fi is not great, so I probably shouldn't have done that. Whoopsie daisy, stop. Okay. And then yeah, there's a little bit more on here. We actually did have a network section of our docs as well. Whoopsie daisy. Just if you want to learn more about that decentralized component and how the API is connected to our network and how it all connects. So you can browse these at your leisure. and you can ask us questions in the booth. So moving to our API reference, this is where you can actually see the endpoints that we provide, and this is where you can test them as well. Again, I'm sorry, Wi-Fi, so I can't really do it right now, but I was just informed that they're pushing a big fix, so stay tuned for that. But we have them broken down into some categories. So these are what we call Class A endpoints, and then we have further categorization in there. So broadly, we separate into balances, NFT, transactions, and base. So balances, this is the most used endpoint that we have. We kind of started with balances, and it's been our rock ever since, and we are making more improvements to it on a continual basis, but especially in the next quarter, it's going to be revamped and faster again. So when you get, in other solutions, you can query, like, does this wallet hold this exact token, for instance? With our balances endpoint, you put in a wallet address, and it just shows every single token that they have. So it's a really good way for aggregating balances data, for building wallets, or just anything where you want to display a user's assets on chain, and you can, again, do that across multiple chains. Our NFT endpoints, a lot of these were developed in the last year just because NFTs became such a huge trend and a huge space for developers to innovate. So you can get metadata for NFTs, like the images themselves, the GIFs, whatever that is, also the attributes. This is kind of more used for building like NFT galleries or speculation tools, for instance. We've seen people build like predictive tools for whether a collection's going to go up or down. So cool things like that. And yeah, NFTs are a fun creative project for hackathons for sure because it's visual. So if you're thinking of doing that, we can support you there. Transactions, so a lot more of these are used in like DeFi use cases. So you can just show a user's actual activity on chain. I'll kind of go into that a little further. And then base. So base is just things like to get a block, a date and time, anything that you might need to help support your other queries. Class A endpoints can be done across every single chain. So if you want to see the supported chains, you can click the drop down here, and this can show you all of the chains that we index, and you can switch between them. Yeah, it'll show you their IDs, everything you need to know, and if, again, you want more details, you go to the docs. And then we have Class B. So Class B originated as just like protocol-specific endpoints. We actually only have this one on here right now, but it's a very powerful set. So if you're familiar with like XY equals K, it's the AMM model that Uniswap v2 popularized that a lot of other swaps have like forked and cloned. So PancakeSwap and SpiritSwap and like a lot of the swaps, basically. So what you can do with this endpoint is you can query all of the DEX data where they use that model. So it's a lot of the DEXs in the market. You can get pools, spot prices, volume, any sort of decentralized exchange data. Really useful if you're doing sort of DEX analytics, and we do support a lot of those clients as well with their info pages. So if you're building something like that, XY equals K is a really powerful tool to use. At the bottom here too, you just have a couple of pricing endpoints that are always useful. So yeah, that's an overview of the docs. And now I'll show you that code templates thing that I was talking about. So if you come by our booth or if you copy the link in this presentation, it's going to take you to the Web3 starter resources. These are some useful things that we're consistently adding to help people get started. So we do a little bit of the work, and you can fork it and modify it and basically just use these in whatever builds you want. So again, if you go to this and you, where's the star? I already starred it, but if you star it, then you're eligible to win those AirPods. This is what it looks like. So right now we have in XY equals K DEX dashboard template. So the ones that I just mentioned where you can show all of that different data, you can fork and clone this and modify it. It looks kind of like this at its base. So we built this out. You could switch the different exchanges. Oh yeah, I'm only on Ethereum, so it's those two. But you can switch the chains supported over here. You can see all the different chains that this supports, and then it'll populate the different exchanges supported on those as well. It even has like a little sentiment analysis thing. And this is, again, just like the very base, so you can improve this. But if you are looking for like a quick thing to build, maybe this is somewhere for you to get started. And then we have a price tracker, Chrome extension as well. I haven't played around with this as much, but I recommend checking it out. We're getting a little more into widgets lately. Oh, you're welcome. We're getting more into widgets lately and components. So if you are interested in integrating those into your apps or whatever you're building, it's another quick addition that you can quickly add in. It might add some pizzazz to your project. And the READMEs for these kind of give you all that you need to know. So, oops, where am I going? Yeah, and then just at the bottom here, we have a code along. So we're starting to do a couple more of those as well. It's just like a Python notebook that you can follow along and get started with. Yeah, there's also like a little bit of a narrative in this one. But you can get started with our API and see what that would look like as well. So just to give a little bit more info on the bounty, pull up this page. I hope the writing is like a decent size. I think I can. There we go. Cool. So as I mentioned, the API is super useful for NFT storefronts, on-chain analytics, wallets. A lot of these are popular use cases that some of our bigger customers who are around sponsoring also use this for. And if you want ever to have like a more in-depth conversation on how that works, you can also come see me at the booth or ask me afterwards. But this is kind of broadly how we look at judging. So 1 to 5 on each of the key factors, which is the creativity and feasibility is kind of a big part. This was more relevant, I think, in like the bull market when you just saw everybody building things like kind of for no reason, which was great, but you know what I mean. So people that are looking to solve a key problem, obviously that's awesome. In judging, we take that into consideration. And then which endpoints you used. I still really recommend checking out log events because that's just like the most versatile endpoint for anything you might want to query. And then the user experience is a factor. I always just advise people, maybe this is the first hackathon or maybe you've done a lot, but good design goes like a long way because it makes you more noticeable and it's awesome. And then the technical competence. So basically just like how organized, how clean the code is, things like that. So the resources are at the bottom of this page. This is published somewhere on ETH Global's site as well. And we actually do have our lead API engineer with us at the booth, which is amazing. It's the first time he's here. So if you have like specific technical questions or anything you want help with or more inquiries, stop by. And he's like around to help with all of that, which is amazing. So yeah, I think, what else did I put in this presentation? Let me just see if I'm at the end. 1 second. Yeah, that's basically it. So if you have any questions, I can take those now. That link, I think, is just going to take you back to the website again, so you can follow everything I just said. And yeah, I'm happy to chat. You can also come up here if you don't want to like say it loudly. But thanks for joining.